it was a really, important thing to, stand with the victims' families, because the victims of terrorism, we have to, yes, support the victims of terrorism, but also oppose the people who want to commit terrorism. That's an important part of it. The standing up to evil is. So my message to people is, when going after Khalistan, I encourage everyone to speak up, and speak up strongly and firmly. The Indian government has done more to stemming the tide of radical Khalistanis in the streets of Canada than the Canadian government. So the Khalistanis numbers are starting to actually decrease on the streets because of actions taken.
Firstly, thank you so much for talking to us, Daniel. We really appreciate this. Now, you were a part of this event at Queen's Park earlier today. Talk to us about why you decided to be a part of this event, and why were you there?
Well, it was an important event. Canada, this is our International Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Terrorism, and it's based off of the worst terrorist attack in Canadian history, the Air India bombing, the Khalistan bombing. 329 innocent people murdered, 280 of them Canadian citizens. And to put things rather lightly here, the Canadian establishment and institutions have failed these families multiple times. So I felt it was important to go out and support and, help, promote the event and bring different communities out there. There was tons of Jews there, and the grassroots Jewish community really did a great job there. There were former political prisoners from the Islamic Republic of Iran who, faced terrorism and extremism. They came out to support. So it was a really, important thing to, stand with the victims' families, because the victims of terrorism are the victims of terrorism. The terrorists are not the victims of terrorism. However, once it was announced that we were going to have a memorial at 12, and that went public, the Khalistanis announced that they were going to have a memorial at 11:30, half an hour before. And they were there to essentially disrupt and gaslight and make a nuisance of things, under the guise of, they were there to, pay respects to the victims. And I equated this with, if a bunch of neo-Nazis in Nazi regalia with, pictures of Adolf Hitler on their shirt came to a Holocaust memorial to, pay respects to the real victims of the Holocaust and find out who really did the Holocaust, because it wasn't the Nazis. It's disgusting behavior, and we wouldn't allow that. So I thought it was important to support, and then doubly so when the Khalistanis came to harass and interrupt and try and disrupt that service. I felt it important to stand up to them as well, because it's one thing to stand with the victims, and we can do that, but it's another thing. I think we have to, yes, support the victims of terrorism, but also oppose the people who want to commit terrorism. That's an important part of it. The standing up to evil is I think, an important part of what we did today.
Right. You said that the Khalistani protesters were there, and they were there to intimidate the event and people who were attending that event. Talk to us about, what you really witnessed yourself out there. Explain to us what the intimidation really meant.
Yeah, so I have enough experience sort of covering craziness on the streets. Unfortunately, that's the experience you can get in modern Canada. And, they came there with their Khalistan flags, and they wanted to come to the memorial site. So as soon as I saw them setting up, there's a video of me. I went to go confront them and let them know what they're doing is, I know what they're doing, put it on there, and tell the police that, hey, what they're doing is incitement and intimidation. And again, they were lying. They claimed that they had a permit, but they didn't have a permit. It was the other side that had the permit. And they wanted to set up, and they're trying to set up basically as close to the memorial as they could and come in and really start pushing, because that's one of the tactics that extremists use is sort of inch by inch by inch by inch by inch, closer, force conflict, and then harass. So it was important for us to sort of set a red line and let the police know that what they're there to do and what we're there to do, and by no means can they come down. So once we got the police on hand, they did move the Khalistanis, a good distance away from the memorial site. But they came and, they wanted to sort of do that by presence, but they were stopped rather effectively. I don't think the Khalistanis expected anyone to stand up to them, so that threw a big wrench in their plans. But because, we were there, we were in bigger numbers, and we showed that we wouldn't be intimidated, they backed off after their initial push and went to do their nonsense further away.
Well, I did spot you holding a placard stating Canadian Jews against Khalistani terrorists. Now, a large contingent of Canadian Jews, including you, was standing in solidarity. What really prompted your community and what prompted you to do so?
So that sign was brought by a different woman, a friend of mine. Shout out to Daphne, who brought it. And listen, Jews have been harassed and threatened, we could say for millennia, for centuries, but especially since October 7th in Canada. It's not been safe on our streets for Jews. And since September and this whole kerfuffle with 100% insurance, it's been unsafe for Hindus. I think the Jewish community really understands this. They've been victims of terrorism so much themselves that and again, I want to give big credit to the grassroots Jewish organizations. Three organizations I'll name are Tafseek, Jaffa, which works in education, and the Canadian Education and Anti-Semitism Foundation, a charity about explaining knowledge. They really pushed it out to the community, and even on short notice, kind of said at the bulletin that it's important for us to come in solidarity. So the grassroots Jewish organizations did a real push to support this because they understand. They've understood. They've seen it, and they get it. And they understand that the institutions are failing the Jewish community right now, and no one's standing up for them. So they wanted to show that they would stand up for all the victims who support us.
Mm-hmm. Now, in Canada, there was a minute of silence for someone like the likes of Niger, who was a criminal. He was also on the no-fly list. But nothing like that for the victims of Canada's most worst terror attack. What's the compulsion of this government, and why this hypocrisy?
I mean, I think hypocrisy is putting it lightly. It's a moral travesty. The easy explanation is Khalistani infiltration to the government, okay? Many high-ranking government officials in every political party are Khalistani aligned, and this has been a decade worth of work. So, within every party, there were the elements sort of pushing the moment of silence for Najjar, and it's absurd that he got a moment of silence of all people. I mean, I had a friend who was murdered by the IRGC, a foreign terrorist organization. He didn't get a moment of silence in the Canadian Parliament, so I don't see why Najjar needed one. It's really shameful. It's just really shameful. The man was denied coming to Canada twice for terrorism and fraud, and then somehow snuck in a third time, probably through a particular MP who got him into the country. Again, Khalistanis are highly connected here. So there's no rational explanation I can offer anyone in India as to why Canada is holding a moment of silence for Najjar, but it is a confluence of many different problems, primarily the infiltration of our political system by not just Khalistanis, but in this case, Khalistanis.
Right. Now, India's External Affairs Minister, had very bluntly said that Khalistani terrorists and extremists have been provided shelter in Canada. Now, what's the sentiment amongst Canadians? Like, an average Canadian, does he really understand? Do they really understand what this means? And do you agree that Prime Minister Trudeau may be scoring political points here by supporting Khalistani movement because, Sikhs, like you said, punch above their weight in Canadian politics?
Yeah, I mean, you could say that. I mean, Trudeau, I don't think Trudeau really needs a reason to do the wrong thing. It's sort of a moral compulsion at this point. There's a lot of reasons, but again, I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words here on just the amount of foolishness that goes on here, but by the end of the day, I don't think this is any sort of special Trudeauism. The Khalistanis infiltrated. He also got praised by Hamas. Churches are being burned down, and he supported that. It's a confluence of just catastrophic moral failures within our ruling party that have led us here.
Right. Now, what is the sentiment amongst Sikhs who really live in Canada, who may not be aligned with the Khalistani movement, who may be out there supporting India. Is there some sort of a fear amongst, say the Hindu communities, the Sikhs who have families back home in India? Do you get any?
Yeah, there's a big there's a big chill in the Sikh and Hindu community around the Khalistan issue. A lot of people are afraid. Now, a lot of Sikhs are very brave, and when you start criticizing Khalistan, the first people who will offer you a platform or sometimes or come to help you out. A lot of them are Sikh themselves who see this as like their duty. But we have a lot of crazy Gurdwaras in our country that have been infiltrated by the Khalistanis, and then you have this whole student visa crisis and nonsense. The visas were just issuing, and these people coming in unvetted, and they're getting whipped into the Khalistani Gurdwaras. And I hear a lot of Sikhs talking about that what they're seeing in the Gurdwaras is beyond the pale. And to go to your previous question, I guess, and how do Canadians perceive this? Canadians are starting to get tired of this. Canadians might not know everything about Khalistan, but they've seen enough, and it's starting to grow. And the Khalistanis are sort of lumped into this group of lunatics running around our streets, making everything worse. So there is a growing awareness among the average Canadian. The average Canadian sees what the Khalistanis are doing and does not like this. The problem is the average Liberal and NDP member of Parliament feels the exact opposite.
Right. Now, you've been very vocal about, what you really think about this movement, about these extremists. Have you ever received threats? Have they tried to intimidate you in person? And what is your message to them?
I mean, listen, do I get threats and this and this and that? Yeah, I do, more than the average person because I am so outspoken. I get maybe 5% of the death threats that people think I do. I do things under my name. I do things under my face. I'm very open. I don't really pay attention to Khalistani, nonsense criticism. Like, they can threaten me and into the void, into the ether. Like, it's not going to stop me. Okay, just give me more engagement. Fine. But I'm not going to be intimidated. And I think it's pretty clear that they're not going to intimidate me, and they're cowards by nature. They might be violent and crazy, but a lot of these people and extremists, they're cowards by nature, and they're vicious, and they tend to attack, easy prey. So my message to people is, when going after Khalistan, I encourage everyone to speak up, and speak up strongly and firmly. And once they learn that they can't intimidate you with a few comments and threats, I mean, I'm in Canada. Most of these Khalistanis who threaten me online are in Pakistan. What are they going to do? So my message to people, to Khalistan, is, one, you can't stop me with this, and if you do something more serious, I'm just going to make fun of you for it. These people aren't as scary as you think they are. Once you just show them some courage and some fortitude, they'll move on to easier prey, because they're all about honor and shame and all this different type of stuff. If they can't harass one little Jewish journalist, then what good are they? So they'll move on.
Right. Now you followed this movement very closely. You write about it. You talk about it. Talk to us about who really is supporting this movement in Khalistan. Who's really supporting these Khalistanis in Canada?
Yeah, in India, it's gone. In Canada, Khalistan is a Canada issue now. Somehow lovely. So who supports them? Other than the hardline Khalistanis, it's like the coalition of bad ideas. So a lot of, or ISI, you see them, wherever the Khalistanis are, all the other bad guys are too. So a lot of Khalistani organizations work very closely and openly with the Muslim Brotherhood here in Canada. The Muslim Brotherhood is the number one ally, I'd say, of the Khalistanis. Both of the Khalistanis and the Islamists make good use of the hard left, the critical race theory and all this type of stuff that you would hear about. If you know it better as woke nonsense, then it's woke nonsense. But the radical leftist ideologues who use this oppressor-oppressed narrative, the Sikhs go and they claim, genocide, oppression, the same sort of playbook. We're the oppressed, they're the oppressor. Right? They take this sort of lazy framing that everyone does. They insert their narrative into it. So hardline lefties again, are the number one allies of the Khalistanis. Number two, so you have the Muslim Brotherhood, the hard lefties, and then a lot of times like the CCP, right? CCP operatives support them too because it's a destabilizing tactic against both India and Canada and America. So they're down with it. But Khalistan is financed by the ISI mostly, and then propped up by the coalition of other radical crazies across the country.
Right. Now, my last question would be, Khalistanis have this agenda, of course, which is an agenda which may not see a future in years and years ahead. But how India is tackling this? What is your perspective? As a journalist, what do you think how this government has really tackled the situation? Tackled Prime Minister Trudeau's comments. The whole diplomacy, the way it moved in the past few months. How do you think India is handling this?
Better than it has before this. One of the good things is they're starting to cancel OCI cards of Khalistanis going back, and I think this is what you have to do. All these people harassing and threatening India, like why do they have OCI cards? Revoke them. There needs to be some sort of deterrence. The Khalistanis, for anything, criminals need to go to jail. Bad guys need deterrence. If you do bad things should happen to you. So the Khalistani numbers are starting to actually decrease on the streets because of actions taken. But the Indian government has done more to stemming the tide of radical Khalistanis in the streets of Canada than the Canadian government. So I would encourage the all these Khalistanis who threaten to destroy India and blah 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 blah. Why do they have CI cards?
All right. On that note, thank you so much for talking to me, and I really appreciate it, Daniel. And let's just keep in touch now.
My pleasure. Anytime. Thanks for having me.